Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3733 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. Happy New Year to all of you out there that are celebrating the new year, and it is such an honor. We just heard from a legendary broadcaster and journalist, African Jamal Davis, and now we are treated to an innovator of percussion and consciousness expansion. What cats were doing on the East Coast and on the left coast, this cat was a pioneer in the Midwest in Chicago, leading large percussive ensembles, opening people's ears and minds to the possibilities of what rhythm can do. Because as we know on the Jake Feinberg Show, rhythm is love. And this guy is more active today than maybe he even was back then, which is so invigorating for peeps like me at 39 who sometimes are aimlessly fluttering around looking and searching for things to do. Never at a loss for anything. Dick Schory, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Jake, my pleasure being here.
What an honor, my friend. Just so great to be able to connect with you and hear your voice. But I just wanted you to talk a little bit about, we let in with, that was a track off one of your albums from '63 with Joe Morello called Night Train. And how did you first connect with Morello?
Well, Joe was an endorsee for Ludwig Drums. And at that time, I was vice president of Ludwig Drums, in charge of marketing and education and product design. And Joe was our top drummer, jazz drummer in Dorsey. And so I had done a lot of shows during the NAMM convention. When the NAMM convention was in Chicago, we would do shows at the McCormick, at the Orchestra Hall, where I played with the Chicago Symphony. But these shows, I'd feature different artists in percussion, and Joe was one of them, along with Gary Burton and Bobby Christian and a whole list of people I had worked with in the studio and as a head of marketing for Ludwig.
I was going to say, can you It wasn't. It's so funny you bring this up because I did an interview in December, my first one with Steve Swallow, and he was talking about playing. It was not called the NAMM show at that time, though. It was the precursor to the NAMM show.
Well,
but he didn't remember the point is he didn't remember the name of it, and he was playing like 20 minutes on, 40 minutes off, and Burton was playing the Vibes, whatever company was sponsoring that.
Well, that was Ludwig.
Yeah. Okay. So, but the point is that was where, and I don't exactly know what year it was, but it was essentially around the late '60s. It's a little bit later, but Swallow actually snuck into the Gibson electric bass booth and fell in love with the electric bass at that time, which was a sin.
Well, for him, that was a big change.
But it was also so denigrated amongst the bebop or jazz purists. He was so intimidated.
Oh, yeah.
But he was pretty bored at the convention in terms of he had seen all the exhibits, and then when nobody was looking, he ducked into the Gibson one and picked up a Fender bass and was like, I can't. My brain's telling me no, 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 but my heart and my hands are saying this feels incredible. So it just, when you look back on it, Dick, did you guys, was there a fundamental understanding that percussion sextets, percussion ensembles could lead to enlightenment?
Well, in those years, let's go back to the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 55, 56, there were 3 what you call full-time percussion ensembles in the country, and maybe 4. There was a marimba ensemble that Gordy Peters started over at Eastman School of Music.
Right. Oh, wow.
Paul Price started a different ensemble. He liked sounds, inverted rice bowls and that sort of thing, and was a little more esoteric. But then,
wait, who was that cat? What was his name?
Paul Price.
Where was he at?
University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana.
Oh, that's what was in the water out there, because some of the cats that came out of there were really wild.
Yeah. So then I started the Northwestern University Percussion Ensemble, but it was made up of all the mallet instruments. And fortunately, I have had 3 students who were great jazz players on vibes and any mallet instrument you want. And Bob Westberg, Chicago, Tom Davis out of Wyoming, and 2 others that were studied with Roy Knapp and Bobby Christian and Jose Bethencourt, all in Chicago. So they came aboard and they played very good jazz. And so I wrote the book. Our concerts all included jazz percussion rather than just all straight classical percussion. And from there, that went on. We were invited to play at the Midwest National Band and Orchestra Clinic, which is now really international. In fact, it was held last week with 22,000 people at McCormick Place, and bands and orchestras and ensembles from all over the world. But it started, my thing started in Chicago at Northwestern. I did my first album the day after I got my degrees from Northwestern, and the following year I signed with RCA Victor Records, and we did 16 albums at Orchestra Hall because I like the hall sound of rather than a studio sound.
Just,
So,
I just want to get this on the record before because we're going to be all over the place. But again, going back to consciousness expansion, was that something that you were? I mean, obviously your ears were growing, but can you talk about that? Was there an enlightenment component to this for you?
oh well, the enlightenment came as I was growing up in Ames, Iowa, and we had, I was in the concert band, the marching band, the orchestra, and this and that, and the city band, but what was being written for percussion was very boring.
Right.
And the instrumentation was very limited. So I started writing very early on because there wasn't anything really challenging to play that was in the normal literature. So that carried on through my Air Force days during the Korean War, into the jazz band and into the concert band. And I have to say that despite how good of training I got at Northwestern, nothing could touch the 4 years of having to write for 2 television shows a week. You can't get that kind of experience outside of the military, and ever since then I've been working very closely with the military, particularly the Air Force Band in Washington D.C. And
wow.
So I had this idea of writing for mallet instruments like you would write for a sax section, and mix the colors. And then one time I asked Bob Westberg, I said, Bob, I want to write this blues tune, and I want to use a jazz harp on it. This is on one of my albums, but I want you to play jazz chimes. Play just a same type of chorus that you would play on vibes, only with two mallets on chimes. So that became Bob's trademark. Then we went on tour all the time, and he'd have to play this jazz chimes blues, and called Chimed, I'm sure. And so I like to expand the colors of percussion, and then oftentimes design instruments to give me colors that didn't exist. And that goes on even to today.
Okay, this is very important. Did you have an experience on the bandstand where the collective consciousness of the audience was raised because of the colors of sounds that your groups were making? I mean, ultimately, that is the experience of music that has gotten lost in our society now, where, I mean, you go to an improvisational, melodic jazz concert, and we've been trained to sit there and stare at somebody's facility. But can you talk about how much you felt early on in a live setting when you were experiencing and intermeshing those colors of those different instruments, and how it affected the collective consciousness of the audience, and then feeding back to the collective consciousness of the group?
Well, I was very fortunate in the fact that my first album for RCA Victor, which was released in fall of 1958, we recorded it in June of '58 at Orchestra Hall, and it was a fall release. It was an album called Music for Bang, Baroom, and Harp.
Yes.
And it was as far out as RCA ever got in their experimental instrumentation. And the instrumentation was 2 guitars, string bass, keyboard player, harp, and 7 percussionists. Now, no one ever heard of such a thing.
I also just want to let you know something. Music for the audience out there, music for Bang, B-A-N-G, Barroom, B-A-R-O-O-M, and harp. Dick, I just want to let you know that there's one copy of this album, and there's a lot of Dick Schory albums on RCA that I've seen. I'm not sure if I've ever seen this one. It's going for a cool $170.
Yeah, I've heard of it going up as far as $500.
So anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. So that was, but
that album started my career in concertizing, and so it hit the charts. Was on the charts for 2 years, the top 10 for 6 months in stereo, and it introduced stereophonic sound.
I'm sorry, it introduced stereophonic sound to the general public?
Yeah,
yeah. How did that happen?
Well, there wasn't too many things out that demonstrated the 2-channel.
Oh.
We were marching. What do we do? National Emblem March. I did a jazz version of National Emblem March, and Bobby Christian and I played the snare drums, and I think Westberg played the bass drum, and we marched in from left to right, and we did all kinds of things of instrument placement to show the separation and use of 2 channels. But anyway, that album became a big demo record for all manufacturers of stereo equipment. And that started a 15-year experience with RCA, where I became the sound image of RCA, not only for percussion, but in their recording technology. But getting back to what effect on the audience, when you have a hit record, if you know what's coming next in your career, the next was to let's go on tour. So Columbia Artists and Management came to me. They were the biggest concert touring, but mostly classical. They had Manavani, Arthur Fiedler, and then Dick Schory was added to that. So I toured.
So classic.
Yeah, and we played a lot of community concerts in all sizes of towns all over the United States for the next 15 years. It wasn't out steady. We would do 3 tours a year, but the tours were all sold out, and we played venues. A lot of venues down in Texas. I knew that in the fall I had to be heading for Texas, and we played Texas A&M and most of the universities down there in that era. This is now in the early '60s, and sometimes we're at community concerts. Sometimes it was a promotion in a major market. Sometimes it was a fill-in date on Monday in a town called Schleswig, Iowa, or Big Springs, Nebraska. But I don't care if it was Carnegie Hall, the Hollywood Bowl, Orchestra Hall, Chicago, or Schleswig, Iowa. The reaction of the audience was exactly the same, because we had humor. We had great players. We had pretty good arrangements, and the audience didn't really know what they were going to hear when they got there, because there was never anything like it. So, but once they got there, we never failed to get several standing ovations during the night.
Wow!
I think I was only out of all the years of touring, there was one night we didn't get a standing ovation, and that was my fault. My fault because I didn't have the guys rehearsed enough. But when that was the first night out, and I never allowed that again. So anyway, the recordings, there were a lot of them, were at that time were the best. That and the touring was the best possible media to reach an audience and make it happen.
Was it?
I toured.
This is. Well, actually, you know what? I want you to sit back because you're cooking the groove right now, Dick. I want you to sit back and listen to this tune, and then we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
Okay, great.
You recognize the name of that tune?
Yes.
Now I'm gonna have a hard time. This is Baia, Baia, and that was off Bang, Ballroom, and Harp.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
That was
unbelievable.
That was like an Arthur Lamond sound.
Absolutely, an island sort of vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had no limits as far as genre of music. We had some heavy classics. We had some tongue-in-cheek versions of We Haven't Tell Overture and the Fire Sirens and everything. So we never took ourselves too serious. From a personal standpoint, we took ourselves very, very serious on the music that we made.
Oh, I dig, man. I wanted. This is so important. Because I'm not talking about when you became. Well, you can put it any way you want, but I mean, as far as allowing cats to stretch out and be themselves. I remember interviewing David T. Walker, great studio guitar player on Motown, and then also was part of Barry White's Rhythm section. And Gene Page was the arranger for a lot of those sessions. And
those are great arrangements.
They're great arrangements. Obviously, you haven't, you know that because you were marinating in this stuff. But the point is, he would go in. Gene Page, it was very sparse. He might write some chord charts, but there was no arrangements, which allowed, and maybe he'd say to the drummer, like, let's get this kind of sort of gallop or feel, but it was not, every T was not crossed, every I was not dotted. And I want to know about Dick Schory in terms of, especially as it related to the live performances, how you struck the balance between making sure that it wasn't a mess, but then also allowing the cats to improvise and be themselves.
Well, we had a lot of open air for the guys to stretch out on. I would write a basic rhythm for each of the instruments, and then say, okay, this is the basic starting point, but now work off each other, and what your basic starting point is, and make it happen spontaneously. Rather than writing out all the notes, I just wrote out a sketch of the sound that I wanted, and let them and their artistry carry it from there.
I absolutely. Now, was that always the way you operated, or was that something that you learned over time because you talk to most guys in smaller group ensembles and they say, well, my idea of leadership is, when I hire people, I let them be themselves. Was that a learning curve for you? Was that something that sort of was always ingrained in you?
No, I'd always been a jazz drummer.
A trap drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I grew up playing the drums. In fact, when I was a kid, was featured with the Meredith Willson show as the demon of the drums. And of course, in those days, Gene Krupa was the idol of all drummers. And so, but I grew up in that era of the big band and the jazz combos, and I had the blessing of knowing the basics of what to do. But then I'd hire guys like Joe Morello and a whole list of players. And one time I went through every album, every tour, and listed all my players that I had. And it was like a who's who of not only percussion, but of trumpet players and reed players and piano players. And I said, oh my God, no wonder I made it, because I had the best blowers in the town. And that was in work, whether I don't care if it was Nashville, L.A., or New York, or London. I had always, or Chicago. And we had some great players in Chicago in that era, and still do. So, you know, I didn't do it all by myself. I had lots of help.
Well, I want to talk to you specifically. Go ahead. Go. Please. Continue.
One of the biggest helps was Gary Burton.
Why?
Well, I'll tell you how he came about with me. I got a call from Chet Atkins one time from Nashville, and Chet says, "Hey, when you coming down to Nashville?" I said, "I'll be down in 2 weeks. I'm doing a few sessions down there." Because I was producing a bunch of country hits at that time too. And I said, what do you got? He says, well, I got a 17-year-old kid that keeps coming down out of southern Indiana to Nashville. He's going to blow you away on vibes. So I said, well, okay, we'll keep him under wraps until I get down there. So I did, and he blew me away. And to this day, he is still the Paganini of the jazz vibes. No one's touched him. There's some great ones, you know, Richardson, guys like that. But he has a sound and a technique all of his own. And I just let him do his thing, on playing choruses. I read out the basic part, and he embellishes it as only he could. So, and the thing is, what I found with Gary in the percussion section, Westberg and Christian or whoever else I had on the other mallet instruments would pick up his style, not his technique, but his style, and they would toss things back. 2 bars, 4 bars, 8 bars on the same tune, that they're talking to each other, and it got better and better as they talked more and more. So it was kind of a freestyle, but with a fairly structured framework on the arrangements.
And we're putting the years on this in the late 60s?
Well, they went up all through the 70s and into the 80s.
But I'm talking about he did an album here, Country Roads and Other Places, and you talked about working down in Nashville. So I mean, when you first connected with him, was that in the 60s or the late 50s, or when did you first?
Well, it was in the 60s.
Yeah, This is unbelievable. And you're telling me that you were producing country records in Nashville as well?
Oh yeah, we had some big hit, number one big hits.
Oh my gosh!
Gold, platinum, and platinum albums like the Kendalls, father and son, daughter.
Well, no, I know about that Kendall story though. That was in that sale with the Black Jazz Records, and that one tune became a huge hit. But was it this was at the RCA studios down in Nashville? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I used other studios down there too. When Chet was busy in his studio. So I've used many of the studios down there over the years. And I had an office down there. I had, I think, 6 people in the office, plus a bevy of country writers. But that's a whole other story.
Well, but yeah, we're just getting cooking here. I mean, it's like the idea here is when you were a bebop drummer, were you using the bass drum for accent and playing time on the cymbals? And who were the cats?
Oh yeah.
Can you?
Sure.
What were some of the small band groups that you were part of? In the earlier '50s, before these barroom, before your
okay, in the early '50s and maybe even late '40s, I became the music director of a small radio station in Ames, Iowa, and programmed all the music. And at that time, I had a band. It was a 5 or 6 piece band: trumpet, sax player, double clarinet, drums, bass, keyboard player. Sometimes, that was it. And I had pretty much free range. I can have that band on the air at the noon hour 3 days a week.
Wow.
And and we were playing good tunes. These guys were all much older than I was. Harry Shockey was a trumpet player, was out of Charlie Barnett's band out of New York, and had moved to Ames, Iowa to start a record shop and a hardware store. And so I had good players then, way over my head, but somehow I faked through it. And so that was my early start on a drum set. And then when I went into the Air Force, I had to play. I was the only jazz player in the percussion section, so I had to play in the big band. Wrote for the big band, 2 combos. In those days, a musician in the Air Force band would sing in the glee club, would play in the 1 or 2 combos, would play in the big band, play in the marching band, and play in the concert band. And it depended on what day and at what time, you're always rehearsing. And on Wednesday night we play the NCO club. Thursday night play the another club on the bass. Friday night the service club, and Saturday night the officers club. So
Dick, that the only way that musical vocabulary can expand is on the bandstand, and you were on the bandstand playing all these different styles all the time.
Every night.
Every night.
Every night.
And that's what the younger cats today. There are no place that there is just not a propensity. I mean, also the other thing is you were playing for regular audiences. You were playing for military veterans and spouses and just regular people that belong to the clubs. So like they would let you know if you were cutting it or not, as opposed to today when you're basically, if you're in academia and you're having a jam session, you're probably playing with 20, 30 other cats who are kind of at the high end of music, and they're not really, patrons of the arts. So it's hard for you to really develop your own individual sound. I mean, it's really a remarkable situation that what you lived through, and how much alacrity and elasticity you were able to play with because you were playing so much live.
Right. Right. And you know, I still to this day work with the military bands. In fact, last week, Colonel Lang, who's the commander of the U.S. Air Force Band, in fact, of all U.S. Force bands worldwide, was here, stayed at our house last Saturday night, the Saturday before Christmas. And he was in town for this big music show, but I do a lot of work with him. And still I'm working in that venue because they still have some of the best musicians in the world, whether it's country, jazz, serious orchestra and band music.
Small group and big band?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the Airmen of Note was...
The Airmen of Note is a phenomenal band.
It was a monster group. I mean, the Cats... But were you playing... I mean, I guess that's the thing. When I interviewed Julian Priester, who's a Chicago cat, he grew up in 53, 54. He was singing spirituals in his dad's church. He was playing with Howlin' Wolf, and he was playing with Sun Ra. Did you get a chance to play with some of the blues cats early on? I have a feeling you did because you paid homage to them when you opened Ovation Records.
Well, I didn't play with them. I produced them on records. Muddy Waters.
On what label though? I mean,
Ovation.
Muddy on Ovation?
Very early on. Willie Dixon was on Ovation.
That I know. That I didn't know about Muddy.
Muddy it never got too much exposure, but
I guess my point was that the blues, Mighty Joe Young, you produced as well. I just curious about your understanding of when you got established in a small group and you're playing in Chicago, how much the blues was alongside the jazz, and how much that shuffle beat, while seemingly simple, is actually incredibly complex and sophisticated to play it with a good feel. And how because listen, I don't care if it's Charles Neville, I don't care if it's John Coltrane or Sonny Rollins or Albert Tootie Heath, all those cats were playing in R&B bands before they were playing bebop. So I kind of wanted to know.
Well, I didn't have the opportunity. I was so busy and so many things at once that I never had the opportunity to really play with any of the blues guys. I knew all of them, and all of them in town had played on sessions, whether they played harmonica or bass, or who they were. But I never had a chance to play drums with them. I had real blues drummers that would play better than I did, but I also had great bass players and guitar players that were into the real funk times and the really authentic blues.
You have any names? I mean, I'm familiar with the session cats like
Satterfield.
So you played with Satterfield?
Satterfield was one of my bass players.
Oh my God! And was he playing upright or electric?
Electric. In
the 50s.
60s.
In the 60s.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was. You had guys like Maurice Jennings and Satterfield and those cats that you were using.
Maurice was phenomenal. And Phil Upchurch on guitar.
Oh yeah.
You get Upchurch and Satterfield and Jennings Wow.
and throw in.
That's when you throw away your drumsticks.
Well, I mean, the revelation for me is that, I mean, Satterfield, I'm just trying to figure out, did Satterfield come, was he on the scene before Jamerson at Motown?
Probably a little after.
Mm-hmm.
He was a little younger.
Yeah, because you throw in Richard Evans too. I mean, it's just I can't even. You throw away Dick Schory was throwing away the drumsticks when Morris Jennings was there, and then all these other dudes too that were just bad. Well, Vernell Fournier, I'm not sure when he came into the picture, but
that was later.
Yeah, it was later. So when you moved, when did you actually move to Chicago?
Well, I finished my tour duty, and I came to Chicago, let's see, 54. My wife and I got married in 54, and I moved to Chicago to finish my degrees at Northwestern University. And but I soon got involved in the studio scene and was teaching ensembles and that sort of thing at Northwestern while I was going to finishing my degrees.
Did you you were playing jingles and in the studios and
Yeah.
And this is where the rubber meets the road. Did you play as an accompanist on sessions that maybe never showed up on records prior to you becoming a leader?
Yeah.
I need to know the albums you were on, because Tom Radke played with the Dells. He doesn't get any credit for that.
Tom Radke is one of the greatest drummers I ever had to work with.
He's a beautiful human being. I mean, again, I have just gotten channeled in the last 2 or 3 weeks into the deepest the Chicago connection. I did Upchurch and Cash McCall and Cleve Eaton a few years ago, and then suddenly out of the blue, I talked to Paul McCartney's drummer, Denny Sywell, who was steeped in jazz. He connected me with Radke, who then connected me with Ron Steele, who then connected me with Dick Schory. So I'm channeling this vein of Chicago rhythm.
If you want to hear Radke play, in a phenomenal set of drums, get the Carnegie Hall album. My Carnegie Hall album.
I regret it. I had it at one time, and I gave it. I mean, Paul Horn, Morello, Radke, Ronnie Elliston. Steele was running the tape out of the van, and then there's Dick Schory leading the charge, and Steele was playing guitar. But again, I want to go back. What albums? What can you name 1 or 2 albums you were on that you were not credited for as playing a trap set?
Well, by that time, I was playing everything else.
All right, just Percussion Maestro. What album can I look for?
Well, a lot of David Carroll albums.
David Carroll?
Yeah.
Carroll?
Yeah.
Now,
his real name was Nick Schreier. But Mercury Records was headquartered in Chicago. And Nick, or David Carroll, was head of A&R. And he did a lot of recording. In fact, copied some of my stuff and had me write some stuff for him. And then it got so that Bobby Christian, Frankie Rulo, and I were first call on all his albums. And I remember he'd call me, "Are you going to be in town on this date? We got a session I want you to do." And it could be the Klebanoff Strings, or it could be David's sessions. and I did some writing for him at that time too. So Chicago in that era was kind of the hub, even more so than the East or West Coast, in the development of percussion, the total percussion.
Explain that. Explain. This is absolutely essential. Explain that.
Well, first of all, the two main drum companies at that time were Ludwig and Slingerland. They were Chicago-based. Campco was a small company just beginning at that time, and but you had teachers coming out of the Second World War, like Bobby Christian and
I just want to read this. David Carroll was born in Taylorville, Illinois. He wrote and recorded many songs, played with musicians such as Tiny Hill, Bobby Christian, Earl Backus, Mike Simpson, Sarah Vaughan, Vic Damone, Patty Page. He was a musical director at Mercury, no mention of Dick Schory. Is associated with the Smothers Brothers. I mean,
yeah, he left to go to the West Coast with the Smothers Brothers.
But did you play on jazz out? Like, did you play on like any Sarah Vaughan albums or Patty Page? Any? Did you play on any of those albums?
No. I conducted a lot of those singers when I was music director of McCormick Place, Airy Crown Theater.
Wow. But that was later, or was that at that time?
Yeah, no, I was in the 70s, late 70s, 80s.
All right, I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off there. So you had the two major drum companies there. Continue on.
Plus a bevy of teachers. Turned out some great students.
Well, and let's be clear, Schory. They were all self-taught. There was no jazz curriculums. They were all self-taught.
That's true.
They were all self-taught drummers. So they were bringing. It wasn't like the saturation of information now and books about everything. And it was all self-taught. So it was all individualized and unique.
Exactly. Yeah.
And do you think that spawned the holistic, and is that why you had all these teachers who were all self-taught, and therefore, and you had the companies there, and how was that different from what was going on in New York? Because I mean, I've interviewed Dick Hyman and Bucky Pizzarelli. Those guys were doing jingles and all that stuff. So how was it different than?
Sure they were.
Yeah.
But I think from the percussion side of things, the drumming side of things, a lot of our guys immigrated to New York and L.A.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But they started out here in Chicago, and the Anderson brothers, for instance, ended up in the West Coast. Tremendous players. There's guys that, I had a 30-year relationship with Hank Mancini, and I would recommend guys that were heading towards the West Coast, and he would hire them. One of my trumpet players and the Anderson brothers and that sort of thing, and Hank and my relationship was all during the period of Moon River and Peter Gunn days of Wine and Roses and the Mancini Andy Williams tours. When they would come to the Midwest, they'd use my band. When I go to the West Coast, I'd use his band.
Oh man!
And in between, we collaborated on a lot of writing assignments, mostly from ideas for new sounds. And for instance, he called me one day and he said, I'm doing an elephant film. I said, oh, an elephant film. Yeah. He says, what would you think if I used on the lead line 8 French horns and 8 bass flutes? I said, I can't even imagine that sound, because I could never be able to find 8 bass flutes in Chicago. He says, but you forgot I'm in Hollywood. He says, okay. I said, well, I got an idea for you. Go out and find a steam calliope for the ostinato sound to go along with those instruments. He called me back 2 days later. I got the steam calliope, and that was Baby Elephant Walk from Hatari.
From Hatari.
Yeah.
Now, did you play on? Because I'm looking here. There's Baby Elephant Walk on all. You've cut that on your albums.
Yeah, sure.
But then on Hatari, was that his band, or were you playing on that?
No, that's his band.
That's his band.
That's a bunch of his studio regulars on the West Coast.
I wanted to. There was just so much regional activity as it related to percussion, and I'd be remiss. I just found this album. I'm having a ball with it. And I want to see what you feel about it. The name, it's on RCA. And 1961, and they do list other RCA Victor albums you will enjoy, and I'm just going to read those first. Son of Drum Suite, Al Cohen and his orchestra. Wild Percussion and Horns Aplenty. New Percussion Ensemble, Dick Schory. Percussion from Melody to Madness, Music to Break Any Mood, Dick Schory. Skin Tight, Marty Gold. And then a Grand Canyon Suite Beethoven by Grofe, Grofe. But this album that I'm holding is titled The First Percussion Sextet, led by director C. Warren Hard. Did you know C. Warren Hard?
No, I did not.
The guys in the group were Bob Swan, Earl Zindars, Bruce Spencer, Chuck Spees, Ralph Roberts, and Doug Allen. And these guys came out of, I want to say Ohio State, 1947.
Okay. I knew the percussion teacher there. And what year was that?
Well, it says, this was 61. It says the first percussion sextet must be credited with unusual foresight because it was formed in 1947 at Ohio State. Needless to say, the founding fathers were all student drummers. By 51, the group was proficient enough in making melody as well as rhythm to appear on TV and in concert before Eastern schools and colleges.
Yeah.
Part of the impact. I just Spees, Rob. Did you cross paths with those guys? I mean, you were right. I mean, they listed two of your.
Yeah,
albums.
Sure.
Yeah.
A lot of them, had names. They earned their stripes, and Ohio State even today has a pretty good drum line. If you saw any of the bowl game, they still play it.
Yeah, I just want to see a smaller band swinging the blues, man. The big band marching I can't get off on that sometimes. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I'd say I love blues. I love and funk.
Well, I know me. That's
blues.
Good. Every album on Ovation and Black Jazz is the great. There's not every single one speaks to that cross-pollination of you had basically this combination of it was, I'm just going to read it here. You had, in my mind, it was halftime funk thing into a straight time into a shuffle. That stuff was happening on every one of those records. So it was a combination of jazz, blues, and funk. And so you nailed that.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about this album actually, it says the first percussion sextet was recorded at West Virginia University. So I mean, these were like huge. These were like percussive ensembles done to a live audience played spontaneously with joy. I mean, it's like, and I guess the one reason I'm fixated on it is because now I've talked to so many trap drummers, and they'll be hearing somebody play, and they'll say, that has to be a machine. And they walk in, and it's a human being playing machine parts. Like, that's where we've gone. Yeah. That's where we've gone to now. You know, it's
unfortunately,
it's very scary for just
yeah,
I mean, well, because you crunch that into the ears of younger people, and they can't detect authenticity. And you guys were all about authenticity. How much of that has carried you through the drive for authenticity, the fact that you are still cooking today, the idea that you still want to create that level of truth in the music?
Well, it carries on today as it did 50, 60 years ago. I'm more experimental, but there's nothing beats a good acoustic player playing with a lot of heart. And I don't care what kind of a ballad or a funky driving piece or a stomping big band chart where you're reading off the trumpet player's parts to catch all the hit cues, and music today, unfortunately, there aren't too many schools that teach really good jazz. North Texas State, you'll never beat them. I've worked with those guys way back years ago, and there are schools turning out some wonderful guys. The University of Iowa, for instance, Tom Radke studied there.
Sure, Max Bennett Bennett was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's my. I want to. This is so important. Explain why they're cranking out technical monsters, but why? Yes. It's to me, when I listen to jazz now, it's very harmonically complex, but not rhythmically. Yeah. It's not rhythmically complex.
Well, you had Morello and Brubeck carry it on, introduced 6/8, 5/9/8,
absolutely,
and so forth.
Absolutely.
That was the introduction to really some interesting time signatures, and there's guys doing some of that. Right now, things are focused, as you say, on the harmonies. But the rhythm section still gets motion going, and
here, you know what I want to get at? I'm stretching you all out but I mean, like, I just talked to a guy, Dr. Lonnie Smith, right, the B3 player.
Yeah.
I was just talking, he's still doing it, and he is one of the few cats that is doing something that I think is like that if more people did, we would be able to expand musical vocabulary. He's kicking bass pedals on his B3, and he's allowing freeing up his drummers to play melodically. We've become so locked into where's the one? You got to keep time. The idea of freeing up the rhythms. If you don't free up the rhythm section, then it just sounds. Well, that's why we have drum machines came in. Somehow human beings couldn't keep time or keep their own time, but it's like that is what's preventing. That's why there's a stagnation. There's a formula trip going on in jazz, and at the same time, there's just no places any major urban center. There's just not music in our culture has taken on a totally different significance. So you don't have Mr. Kelly's,
London House,
the Cloisters, and
Blue Note.
You don't have places. You don't have places for cats to work out their angst 6 nights a week in an upholstered sewer somewhere for a month at a time. And that's the problem. I'm sure and again, at the same time, some of these schools, the greatest players are not always the best teachers. So it's like, I feel for the younger cats. I don't have solutions for it other than going back and tapping into the wisdom of just Hank Mancini and you, the dedication to wanting to create new colors, new sounds, build new instruments. Invention, all the pioneers of music, Bobby Christian, Dick Schory, Emil Richards, Lou Harrison, this goes on and on, Harry Partch. These cats were built, these guys were inventing stuff. They were never content. The music is, when you go to school now and they say, you're going to learn jazz and you're going to learn everything there is about jazz and then you're going to do it. As last time I checked, the pioneers of the music were never content. They were always searching for new and fertile ground, but yet experimentation commercially now is absolutely a death knell. And that's part of the issue. When you were cranking these records out, they let it breathe, man. They let the music breathe. Now it's just play it safe, play it light, and be conservative because people just want a formula trip. And that, to me, is about as boring as it gets. So when you can't quantify that commercially, then you're not going to grow vocabulary in music.
Well, that's the problem. The categories that we have today are very limiting on how they allow you to stretch out. And the drum machine, there's things you can do with a drum machine to be very creative as long as you don't let it take over your life.
And Pro Tools, but that's the other thing, dude. All the singers that David Carroll worked with, I mean they were really good. They were really good at what they did. You guys were musicians more than craftsmen. You were really good now. But with Pro Tools, if you're beautiful looking and you have a lot of Twitter followers, then, they can fix, they can say, how did I sound? The engineer can say, terrible, but we can fix it. So, we're slouching towards Gomorrah in some ways. This is like a very
But where did the heart go?
Where did the heart go, Dick? Where did the heart go? And it's just, what's inspiring to me is just the fact that you are still out there kicking butt and doing it, because there are no easy answers. The greed factor is so insane now. And the idea of just making a reasonable living off of being a studio shark or playing a pizza joint for 6 nights a week, that stuff is become,
it's disappearing.
Well, not even that. Not only that, it's just the whole concept that music is a musician's gift to the world, and because music is unquantifiable, you can't pay them. You can play for the door. You can play for the door, or you can pay to play. You actually, Dick, can you imagine if somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, Dick, you can play on this session. You have to pay to play." It's pretty scary. It shows a dangerous slant. But listen, we're just getting going. We just cooked for 67 minutes here. Could we? We're just getting started with Dick Schory, a legendary multi-percussionist and band leader, and really stretching the lineage. Could we do part 2 same time next week? Would that work?
Yeah. What the Wednesday?
And we'll say 1 p.m. Chicago time, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right, and we'll definitely do a dive into the Ovation Black Jazz at that time. But it's important to paint the full picture of Dick Schory and the impact that you've had on our culture, because as we've just identified, it's changing and not really for the better. I think Chicago remains. It may not have the regional sound it once did, I think there's only one place in America actually that has a regional sound, and that's New Orleans now. But I think
I think you're right.
I think there are still places in Chicago that do have the jam sessions and that get it. I could be wrong. I haven't been there in a long time, but I think
there's no London house to promote the quartets and piano oriented acts.
All I'm saying is this: that in the last being able to interview Radke, who was playing with Novak. I just interviewed Ray Neapolitan. The dude was playing in a jazz trio, and the other jazz trio was with Chuck Domenico. And Chuck Domenico drove a truck at O'Hare Airport. I mean, it was just like bubbling. And then of course, Steele's telling me the soulful strings were getting some momentum off these hits. And next thing you know, they're in the London house playing live with a string section and a jazz harp player. I mean, it was just part. And now it's like, okay, yeah. I'm going to go to the Jazz Standard to see Pat Martino, who's a dear friend of mine who I love dearly and is still playing his butt off. And yet all I see is waiters and waitresses coming to get drink orders and dinner orders, getting the food out, paying the check, set one's done, empty out, come back in. You know, it's become this upper crust thing, and it's not really doing it for me, really. I mean, it's always been a street music, you know, and then obviously the biggest factor where you continue to make residuals and is just there's no studio scene anymore, so it's become an efficiency model and it's become a money saving thing, and so these are things we have to work through. And I am so glad you are still here and rocking. We are just going to get started, and we're targeting March to. My partner and I to get out and to Chicago to see you and Steele and anybody else who was involved with Ovation and hence the Black.
Well, there's a few of them still left, but they're dying off pretty fast on us.
Hey, I need to get to them, just like I need to get to the West Coast. I just talked to a guy out there, and he's hipping me to this guy Frank Jackson, who's 91 and was a musician who played when Charles Sullivan was running the entire Fillmore district when it was a black capitalist district. You understand? James Brown and the funk and that you love so much, Dyke and the Black. Those guys were doing the entire circuit. It was all black run, black owned. My generation and younger generations need to know the truth. Whether they want to accept it is a different story, but they need to know the truth.
Yeah.
So that, you know, listen, do I have your email, by the way? Do you have an email?
Yeah, I don't know whether I want to give it on the
I'll call you back because I want to send you a copy. I want to send you a copy of this interview. So I'll call you back on my phone. We're locked in for next week's set 2. Dick Schory, it was such a great hang, and we're going to leave today with a tune by Dick Schory's new percussion ensemble known as Stumbling. So, Dick, thank you for taking the time, man.
That was just a joke. But go ahead and play it.
I will, and I'll give you a call back on my phone after we wrap up.
Okay,
all right.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.